How do we test the hypothesis that ADHD is adaptive? We've seen that it's genetic and that it exists across the world regardless of cultural pressures. Why would we guess that ADHD was an adaptation in the first place? The main rationale is simply that ADHD behaviors, including hyperarousal, narrow attentional range, and short bursts of focus, seem like nearly everything a primitive hominid would need in order to survive and reproduce. It's hard for children with ADHD to deal with the monotony of school, where you are expected to focus your attention on a single thing for several hours at a time. It would have been equally hard for people with a 7R ADHD allele to cope with life after the agricultural revolution, because agriculture replaced the behaviors involved in survival with new monotonous chores. Some researchers even argued that ADHD was the norm until it suddenly became disadvantageous during the agricultural revolution and has now dwindled down to a much smaller demographic. But so far, it's just speculation. So how do we test our hypothesis? The first thing you might do is find a modern population of nomads or hunter-gatherers. Aiming to find a culture and lifestyle as similar to our ancestors as possible so you can demonstrate the time lag argument. We can't directly study whether our ancestors had higher levels of ADHD, but there are people alive today who still practice roughly the same lifestyle, and we can study them. If you find that the nomads have higher levels of ADHD in environments more similar to the EEA, then you've at least done a solid job demonstrating that people with ADHD seem to flourish in more ancestral environments. But to provide really strong support for the idea that ADHD is an evolved adaptation and that time lag is the reason it hasn't disappeared, you've got to go back to those nomads and determine whether their ADHD symptoms are actually associated with higher fitness. A team of researchers led by Chuansheng Chen have done exactly this. Not only have they shown higher fitness levels among nomads with ADHD, they've also found lower fitness levels among sedentary agricultural people with ADHD. In other words, it's a confirmation of our time lag hypothesis, right down to the idea that ADHD behaviors are beneficial in a more natural environment, but harmful in a very structured, safe community. We all recognize anxiety. It's a general feeling of apprehension about what might happen to ourselves or our loved ones. In colloquial terms, we call it worrying. In some ways, anxiety is one of the easiest psychological problems to explain within an evolutionary framework. One could hypothesize some conditions illustrating how anxiety was adaptive in the EEA. How might anxiety have conferred an advantage to our ancestors? And what conditions in the modern world might cause suffering or difficulties for people with anxiety?